If you have an old Mac from 2013 to 2015, like this old MacPro trash can, let me show you how you can upgrade it with a modern graphics card as an external GPU. Welcome to Jesse's Flying. All these Macs on this list have three things in common. They're quite old, the graphics cards are quite old, and they have Thunderbolt 2 connectors. And so it would be easy to upgrade them and to use them for modern tasks if you could connect an external modern graphics card. Unfortunately, Apple doesn't support external graphics card via Thunderbolt 2. They only support it via Thunderbolt 3, even though it's technically no problem, as you will see in a minute. And one special case, obviously, is the MacPro 2013 trash can, because this one has a quite fast Xeon CPU, but you cannot exchange the old graphic cards. So what do we want to talk about in this video? First, what is an eGPU and which eGPUs should you use for your Mac? Second, how can you connect it to your old Mac? And third, how can you enable it in macOS? And I will give you all the files you need for the MacPro trash can if you own one of these, and I will show you a step-by-step instruction how you can enable it for all the other Macs that are on this list. So let's go. So what is an eGPU, an external graphics card? Basically, it's a case with a power supply. Many of them have a USB hub in the back, and you have one slot where you can plug in a full-size graphics card. For instance, here in my eGPU, I have the AMD Vega 56. And that brings me to my next point. What eGPU should you get to have it connected to your Mac? There's a lot of information on egpu.io. I give you the link also down in the video description. For instance, this here is the Razer Core X Chroma. That is one of the most compatible eGPU cases that I know of. Basically, it's all about the controller chip, like a TI 82, TI 83 or whatever, but more tips on egpu.io. And what graphics card should you use? Basically, I always suggest AMD graphic cards because Apple has skipped NVIDIA a long time ago. And just look what graphic cards are still supported, for instance, in the MacPro 2019. Like the AMD Radeon RX 560, 570, 580, the AMD Vega 56 or 64, and some of the newer graphic cards like the 6600, 6700, 600, 800, something like this. But those newer graphic cards only run on macOS Monterey because the OpenCore Legacy Patcher could only make drivers available in Sequoia or Sonoma or Ventura for AMD, the RX series like RX 580, or the AMD Vega series like the Vega 56 or 64. So in my opinion, the best graphic card you can get with is the AMD Vega 56. Why? Because it doesn't have that much of a power draw, and you could use that card also in the MacPro cheese grater, the big aluminum one from 2009 to 2012, without doing any modifications to the power supply, like the Pixeless mod. So this card you can plug in to the Mac Pro, no modification needed, and you can also use it as an external graphics card. So what do you need to connect this Thunderbolt 3 eGPU to a Thunderbolt 2 Mac like the Mac Pro? At first, obviously, you need a Thunderbolt 2 cable, and that is the same plug as mini display port. And you need the official Apple adapter from USB-C Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 with a DisplayPort plug. And a word of warning, those aftermarket adapters most likely don't work because it's not just a change from USB-C to DisplayPort. it also has to do some changes in the protocol from Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2. So you would take this adapter, plug it into the Thunderbolt 3 USB-C plug of the eGPU, and then you take the cable, plug it into the adapter, and the other part of that cable goes into your Mac with Thunderbolt 2. And if you would plug it in right now, it won't work. And so let me show you how you can enable the connection. Basically, you just trick macOS to accept the Thunderbolt 2 connection to the eGPU. And the good news is it works with the latest OpenCore Legacy Patcher 2.4.0. Bad news, it still only works with macOS Monterey. But I'm in full swing coding and testing and tweaking, and the results for macOS Ventura already look very promising that we can have the next video, and that's the reason you really should subscribe my channel, click the bell for notifications, because in the next video I hopefully can present you how you can connect the eGPU to a Thunderbolt 2 Mac with the latest macOS Ventura at least, or maybe already Sonoma or Sequoia. So let's start installing, tweaking and coding with macOS Monterey. So some of that Macs that were on that list are officially supported until macOS Monterey. Some of them are only supported until macOS 11 Big Sur, and some are only supported up until macOS 10.15 Catalina. So if you happen to have a Mac that's only officially supported to Catalina or Big Sur, here is my ultimate tutorial how you can install the latest macOS version on your unsupported Mac. It applies to all different macOS versions, and for this video choose latest macOS Monterey and install it on your unsupported Mac. For those who have a Mac like the MacPro 2013 trash can that officially support macOS Monterey, update it to the latest version, and then you also have to install the OpenCore Legacy Patcher, because we will use the OpenCore bootloader to enable that Thunderbolt 2 connection to the eGPU. So go to the GitHub repository of the OpenCore Legacy Patcher, links are down in the video description. Download the latest version 2.4.0 of the OpenCore Legacy Patcher and install it to your Mac on macOS Monterey. After you have installed it, do a reboot, and then you have to make sure that you load the OpenCore bootloader. So keep the Option key pressed on your keyboard until you see the Apple boot selector. Then select EFI boot, keep Control pressed, and you will see there is the icon changed into a circle, so you set it as a standard boot option. Then hit return, and then you will see the OpenCore boot selector screen. Here you can choose macOS Monterey, and I would suggest you also keep Control pressed to set it as standard boot option, hit return, and it will boot up into macOS Monterey. You won't notice any difference. The only difference might be that if you go to the system settings, you see that little red 1 with the system settings, because it now suggests macOS Sequoia as an update because you loaded the OpenCore boot selector. But we won't do that for this video yet. We stay on the latest macOS Monterey. And so if everyone now is set up with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher 2.4.0 and the OpenCore loaded on the latest macOS Monterey, we can start enabling the Thunderbolt 2 connection. And I will show you that with a MacPro 2013. If you don't want to fuddle around with all that files, I give you a download link down in the video description where you can just download the ready file that I use here. But It only works on the MacPro 2013 and it only works with AMD graphic cards, okay? Other than that, I will show you a step-by-step, and it's quite a few steps. It's quite easy, okay? I will show you a step-by-step instruction that you can do that for your old unsupported Mac if it is not a MacPro 2013, or if it is and you want to do it manually by yourself so you understand what we're doing here. Let's go. So as you can see, I'm here on my MacPro 2013 and it has the latest macOS Monterey version 12.7.6. And what we need to do now is we have to go to our EFI boot partition. And that's a hidden partition, so we got to find it and we got to mount it so we can access it, okay? And therefore, we just go to the Launchpad, Other, and we start the terminal. And now we just write, and by the way, all the commands are also down in the video description, diskutil list, and then you see a list of all your partitions and of all your volumes on your computer. And as you can see, there's an internal physical version and there's a synthesized version. And what we are looking for is the word EFI. And you can see the word EFI is up here and it's called disk0s1. Okay, that's the identifier here, disk0s1. And it's most probably the same on your Mac. So what we do now is we say sudo for superuser do, that's an admin command, diskutil mount, and then we say disk0s1, that is the EFI partition. If we hit return, we have to answer our password, and now it's mounted. Now we can go into our Finder, and as you can see here on the left side, locations, there is now the EFI partition. And it basically has two folders, EFI and system. If we go into EFI, there's a folder OC, that means OpenCore. And here in that OC folder is a config.plist file. That's the configuration for OpenCore. And that's the file where we have to add some commands. If you don't want to struggle with all that changing in the file, also down in the video description there's a small download, and that's a ready-made config.plist file from me for the MacPro 2013. So for instance, at first let's duplicate that file so we have a backup, okay? And now when we just go to the downloads, and here Monterey 12.7.6 with the OCLP, the OpenCore Legacy Patcher 2.4.0, that's my download. And you can see there's a config.plist. If we just take this, we say copy, and we go back to EFI, OC, and we just paste the item here. It says an older file already exists, replace. And we're nearly done. We need one more file, okay? And that is, we go to the downloads, back again into our folder, and there is the kryptonite.kext file. And we just say copy. We go back to our EFI partition, EFI, OC, and there is a folder. That's the folder where the config.plist is. There's a folder called kexts. We just go in here and we say paste item in here. So we have the kryptonite.kext pasted here. We're done, basically. If you now do a reboot, and you should see the OpenCore boot selector, where there's the OpenCore version name 1.0.4 in the lower right corner. And after 5 seconds, it should start macOS Monterey. And when Monterey pops up, then it should be able, if you plug an eGPU into the Thunderbolt 2 port, it should be able to handle that eGPU. But I'd like to show you the manual way how you can edit your config.plist, because this config.plist in the download only is for the MacPro 2013, and if you have a different Mac, then there will be a different config.plist. But let me show you how you can insert parts that we need into that config.plist. What you also can do already is to copy the kryptonite.kext file into that kext folder, because you need that as well. So when you have copied the kext file, let's go back one folder, and we are in the config.plist folder, in the main OC folder where the config.plist is. And therefore, as this is already the changed config.plist, let me just delete this, and we take our backup that we did, and I just rename it back to config.plist. Okay, so this is how your folder should look right now. Okay, but now we need a tool to modify that config.plist, okay, to have it easy to do that. And there's another download I'd like to show you, and that is the ProperTree tool. Okay, all links down in the video description, and we will talk about the tools and OpenCore a little bit later in the video. So when you are on the GitHub repository from ProperTree, you just go here to the green button where it says code, and you just say download zip. When it's downloaded and you go into your downloads folder, you see a folder that's called ProperTree master. If you go into that folder, you have a file that's called propertree.command. If you start that, it will complain that it cannot check if it's malware or anything else. Okay, so we have to go into the system preferences, and here we go to security and privacy, and you see down here ProperTree command was blocked from use because it's not from an identified developer. You can say open anyway, open. We can close the system config, and it says, okay, we need Python 3. That's a programming language this tool is written in. So we can just say, yes, I want to install Python, and it does that automatically for us. We just have to enter our password. And now it installs Python 3, and then it will open up the tool. There we go. And we can just minimize this here, and we need to open our config.plist file. Okay, so now we go back into my download folder, and we use the config.plist that I made for that MacPro 2013 to copy and paste the important stuff into your config.plist in the EFI partition. Does that make sense? Okay, so we go back here, we go into my download folder, and we open this config.plist file here. So if we click ProperTree, file open, and we go to downloads into my folder config.plist open, you can see, and let me enlarge this a little bit, there are very many parts in that config.plist. Don't worry, we can just minimize those first parts until we see kernel. And when you're here at the kernel tree, we go down to the latest entry 15 here, and this, you can see there is the kryptonite.kext. That is the entry that loads the kryptonite.kext that we already copied into the kext folder. So what do? We just click this with a right click, and we say copy. And now we need to open your config.plist file in the EFI boot partition. So we say file open, and we go to the EFI partition, EFI OC config.plist, open. And you can see there's a new window popping up with your actual file. And as well here, you can see original model in the very top of that file. There should be your Mac model. If it's like me here, it's a MacPro 6.1. That's the MacPro 2013. There should be your model. So here the same. We just minimize revision, ACPI, booter, device properties until we see kernel. And now we go into that add tree. And you can see there should be maybe 14, maybe more, depending on your Mac model. And we just go here to that add and we say right click, paste. And then you can see the kryptonite part is here. What you should do, we just minimize all these different kext entries. In my case, for the Mac Pro, it's now 15. And number 0 that I pasted, as you can see, is the kryptonite version. So let's take number 0 and we pull it down into the last position. If you can see, now it's position 15. So it loads at the last kext that is loaded. Because if it loads first, it can cause any trouble because there are some other dependencies with the different kext files. So what are kext files? Kext just means kernel extension. It's more or less like a driver for the kernel, for the main core part of the macOS. Okay. So we have now added that kext, that it is loaded because it's in the config.plist, and the kext file, the kryptonite.kext file, is in the folder kext as we copied that before. Now we need some arguments to load that kext file. So we go back to my sample config.plist. Let me just go up here and we just minimize kernel, we minimize miscellaneous, and now we're at NVRAM. That's the next tree we need. And you can see there is a tree add, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 keys that have some very large numbering name, but somewhere in between you see boot args, boot arguments, and that is the line we need. Okay, so let me just enlarge this a little bit more, and if you can see on the right side there is keep, sim as, debug, lilu, beta, all, and so on. There are some boot arguments that might differ with your Mac. These boot args are for the Mac Pro 2013. But what we need, we do a double click here. So we highlight that and we do Command C to copy that. Now we go into our EFI file that's in the EFI partition. So we minimize kernel, we minimize miscellaneous, and here's NVRAM, and these are the boot args. We do a double click here and Command V. You can see we copy these arguments at the end of that line. Hit return and we're good. If you're using, or if you're planning to use, an NVIDIA graphics card, that is always tricky, and obviously here you have to write NVDA, those 4 letters, NVDA, instead of AMD to load NVIDIA cards. But you might need some NVIDIA web drivers, and these are only for High Sierra and so on. So NVIDIA is always troublesome. I strongly recommend using AMD graphic cards that Apple also had in their Macs officially. And now we're done. These are the changes that I made to that config.plist in my ready-made config.plist for the Mac Pro. So we just say here, file save, and we can close it and reboot, and then let's see if the eGPU works. Alright, everything is set up. Let me plug in the Thunderbolt 2 cable into my Mac Pro and let's check what the other display says. You can see the eGPU is revving up, and there it is. We have two monitors connected. This one via DisplayPort directly to the Mac Pro, and the other one in the far corner is connected here to that eGPU. So it works, and it was quite easy. So that concludes my macOS Monterey version of connecting Thunderbolt 2 Macs with eGPUs. As I said, give me a comment below the video or just join our Discord community and give us your feedback. Does it work with your Mac? What are the problems? Or what graphic cards can you use? Which work, which don't? And let's discuss that. Don't forget to subscribe my channel, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss the next part, hopefully with a thumbs up for macOS Ventura and maybe already for Sonoma or Sequoia. Thank you so much for watching. Have fun here on my channel. See you soon. Bye bye.